Factotum de la Ferro. Quick now to the work. The iron is waiting. So, by definition, a factotum is a multi-skilled professional who specializes in multiple things at once. Strength here, technique there, lifts high, problems low. So Factotum is designed as an off-season powerlifting and strongman hybrid program that tries to get you to improve in both sports concurrently while using a modified conjugate approach. Now, if you want to save yourself the trouble, just go ahead and hit the description box down below and you'll be able to fill out a form to grab yourself a free copy of the PDF for this ebook. Also, I do offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time, and the odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. But with that being said, let's continue and break down this program. Now, obviously with this program, I'm going to be making some key assumptions, not the least of which is you're someone who's generally comfortable with their technique on their main movements, and they've got a reasonable base of competence in both sports. This is not a beginner program. Additionally, you got to make sure you have all the standard implements you're going to need to be successful. So that's going to include a barbell and plates, strongman logs, some dumbbells, various machines or heavy bands, sandbags and several weights, as well as an air assault bike. Additionally, you could swap out the sandbags for farmer's walk handles. I'll talk about that a bit later. And it's always worth having some specialty bars. I suggest an SSB, a giant camber bar, and a Swiss bar, just to name a few. So as a hybrid program, Factotum wants you to train, obviously, in two sports at once. So we're going to be focusing on your squat, your bench, and your deadlift to powerlifting standards, which means no straps and no hitch, as well as your log clean and press, the sandbag heart shock, and then a 10-minute air bike calorie test. And I do think it's worth taking a minute just to discuss those last two items on that list. The sandbag heart shock is honestly one of the most reliable indicators and predictors of both moving event and loading event success. And again, you could swap this out for a farmer's walk using a similar protocol, which I'll dive into when we get to that programming section. And then the 10-minute air assault by calories. I just like this one because it's a really good low impact option to help improve your overall conditioning, and it also is highly correlated to power to weight ratio, which is critically important in both sports, especially if you are competing in a weight class. The split itself is fairly typical, so there can be 2 lower body days, 2 upper body days. You have both intensive and developmental days. Intensive acts as the analog for max effort, and then developmental acts as the analog for dynamic effort. In general, you can rearrange the days how you will, but you want to make it so you're not lifting more than 2 days in a row, nor should you take more than 2 days in a row off. As always with the accessories, I give you a menu of accessory progressions you can use as well as suggested alternatives. You can always make your own modifications and adjustments based off of what you like and you feel works best for you as well as what you have access to. But when in doubt, try to follow what I've written out, as I find that these tend to pair really well. So day 1 is our lower developmental day. We're going to start the session off with sandbag extensions, a deadlift, a fat neutral grip row, so you would need a Swiss bar for this. Additionally, you could put some fat grips on dumbbells and do it that way. Really, any sort of row variation is going to work. I just like the FNG row because it has so much carryover to your sandbag and stone picks off the floor. And then after that, you'll do your heart shock training, glute ham raises, and ab wheels. And again, as always, you've got alternative options listed. Now with that first movement of the day, it is a sandbag extension, but you could also swap that out for a Zercher triple extension. You could do a high pull or even cleans if you feel comfortable with them. The entire thesis of this is it's just an explosive, quick moving exercise. You want to treat it as a loaded plyometric. We're not looking for max overload here. And what's going to happen is you'll start off doing 10 singles every minute on the minute. Then in week 2, you do a single on minute 1 and then a double on minute 2, and you just go back and forth accordingly. And the entire idea here is you're just going to add weight as it makes sense. Now, some folks do find they feel a lot better squatting twice a week, in which case this is a really good speed squat wave that you could use. I think a good way of hedging your bets is if you're more focused on strongman, do the sandbags. If you're more focused on powerlifting, do the speed squats. And if you've got the work capacity of a bull moose, do both. Now the deadlift is going to be trained using an alternating approach here where on odd weeks we're going to be doing block pulls and on even weeks we're going to be doing deadlifts from the floor, really focusing on speed. You want to base this off of your 1 rep max done raw with no hitch, aka powerlifting standards, and then the blocks themselves should be no higher than 3 inches. Once you break about a 3-inch block, it doesn't have as much transference. It's something where it's been my experience when you can do those low block pulls a lot of power, once you add back in the leg drive of pulling from the floor, you're going to get that bar moving really nicely. And then last but not least, let's discuss the heart shock program. For those unfamiliar, start next to a bag, run 60 feet away from it, run 60 feet back, carry it 60 feet. That whole series is 1 repetition. So ideally, you're going to have 3 bags. The lightest bag should probably be 1 or 2 lighter than your weight class that you compete at. Then the medium bag would be one or at your weight class. And then the heaviest bag should be at your weight class or maybe one above if you're really capable. But when in doubt, you can always move these down based off of your conditioning and loading capabilities. And then you could also swap this out for a farmer's walk. I lovingly call this variation a cattle prod. In this case, you just need to kind of play with the weights. Think weights that feel easy for 60 feet, challenging for 60 feet, and then a near-death experience for 60 feet. Alrighty, moving on to day 2, we're going to start with our upper intensive. It's going to be a bench press variation pairing, which I'll talk about in a little bit. 40-degree incline, chin-ups, Lou raises, overhead triceps, and a rope handle hammer curl. Again, make the changes that you like, especially on something like the 40-degree incline. You could swap that out for barbells, dumbbells, use a specialty bar. If you want to go a little steeper incline for more shoulders, slightly shallower incline. I just like the 40-degree incline all around. I think it is one of the best log developers in particular. Now, as far as how we train the bench in this program, what we're going to be doing is using an alternating A-B scheme, where on A weeks we're doing higher repetitions with a lighter loading variation, and then on B weeks we're going to go a little bit heavier with a heavier loading variation, chasing a lower repetition maximum. And the idea here is you want to pick 2 variations that help address where you tend to miss your bench press. So for example, if you miss it at mid-range on your lighter weeks, do a 2 or 3 board press. And then on your heavier weeks, opt for a pin press that has you hitting where you tend to miss. Now for some personal favorites, if you're just looking for good all-around development, on the lighter weeks, a close grip bench, and on the heavier weeks, a Larson press. So then here is what that 8-week wave looks like. So you can see again we have A and B weeks where, for example, in week 1 we're doing a 10 RM with our light variation, and then in week 2 we are doing a 6 RM with our heavy variation. And the idea here is by alternating the A-B variations, we change the load and positioning every week to help give the body and mind a bit of a break, but we're not just throwing random variations at the wall and hoping for the best. Additionally, if you wanted to run this more as a straight block, you could do the first 4 weeks with your lighter variation, then the higher reps, and then move into your heavier variation for the latter half of the program. Either way would work really nicely. Then is day 3. This is our lower intensive day, and what we're going to do is we'll start with our squat. Then it's going to be a stiff leg deadlift, SSB good morning, RDL, whatever you like. A snatch grip RDL is a personal favorite as well. Use straps if you have to. Chest supported row of your choosing. Some single leg work, be it walking lunges or the dreaded Bulgarian split squat. And then an air assault bike, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Just like we did with the bench press, the squat is going to be trained using that alternating weekly approach, and you'll pick 2 variations based off where you tend to miss. So for example, if you're just generally unstable on the squat, you feel really squirrely, for your lighter variation you might opt for a beltless SSB squat, and then for your heavier variation, use a giant camber bar. Now, personal favorites for good all-around development, I'd use an SSB on my lighter weeks, and then a paused high bar squat on my heavier weeks. Now, again, here's the wave. As you can see, it's the same one that we're using for upper body, just for the sake of simplicity when it comes to the program. And this is an off-season program. It is not meant to peak you for both sports concurrently, so please keep that in mind. Alrighty, so now when it comes to the air bike, what we're going to do here is, even though the test is based off of max calories done in 10 minutes, in week 1, when you do that 10-minute test, track how many calories you put out, but also track your average wattage. Because once you have your average wattage, you're going to scale all of these weeks of training based off of that figure. So for example, if you hit 300 watt average in week 1, in week 2 you're doing 5 rounds at 2 minutes at 270 watts. And our final day in the training week is going to be the upper developmental day. So we're going to have the log clean and press, bench press, chin up, incline flies, skull crushers, and face pulls. Again, you can make substitutions as you'd like. One that I really like for the face pulls in particular is I will actually do these with a sled and just try to accumulate a 1/4 mile of distance at a steady tempo and then try to go a little bit faster every week. But again, this is just a good general guidance in terms of picking accessory movements. And this is what the log and bench programming looks like for the 8-week wave. And you'll see here with the log, we focus a lot on doing fewer reps per set, but doing a lot more sets in general. And that's just to get you more first reps and help you practice your clean in particular, which I think is something that's really important for the strongman athlete's overall development. And then the bench is a fairly basic progression as well. And you can certainly swap these around if you prefer to do slightly higher reps on the log. Either way, you can see the idea here is we just ramp up a little bit, cut volume, ramp up again. It's a pretty basic wave approach. Now these are all the various suggested accessory progressions and how you'd go about using them. Again, just grab yourself a copy of the PDF down at the link below. Save yourself the trouble. So that really wraps it about up. So yeah, again, that is Factotum, a good way of how to train for both sports at the same time during the off season. Let me know if you have any comments or questions. The best ones are ones I will turn into topic videos down the road. If you grab yourself a copy of the PDF, there's also a lovely little link in there if you feel like buying me a cup of coffee. And of course, I do offer one-to-one coaching. But that's all I really got for you folks. So take care, and I'll see you in the next video.